A woman accused of travelling to Syria and joining ISIS is set to face court in Sydney. She is one of 3 women who were arrested after a group, which included 9 children, flew back into Sydney and Melbourne last night, more than 6 years after being taken into refugee camps in Syria.
Extremism experts say authorities face an uphill battle reintegrating the cohort back into the Australian community. Our correspondent Bridget Rollison was on the same flight as the families flying into Melbourne last night and joins us now. Bridget, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you. What's the latest with these charges that have been laid?
Yeah, it's been a big 24 hours. So I can tell you that 32-year-old Janaya Safar, so she flew into Sydney last night and she's been charged with terror-related offences. So that relates to her entering and remaining in a declared conflict zone in Syria, as well as joining ISIS. And both of those offences are quite serious charges. They carry a maximum jail time of 10 years. So the Australian Federal Police said that she travelled to Syria in 2015 to join her husband, who left Australia to join ISIS, and she's going to face court in Sydney later today. In Melbourne, where I was, 2 women were arrested last night at the airport. So that is 53-year-old Kausa Abbas and her daughter, who is 31-year-old Zainab Ahmed. Now, they're expected to be charged with different kind of crimes. They're crimes against humanity, including enslavement. So this relates to allegations of their treatment of a Yazidi slave that this woman claims, and she's been speaking to the ABC about how she was held captive in their home. Now, when we got into Melbourne last night, I was on the plane with them, obviously. We basically waited on the plane to see what was going to happen. We didn't know if they were going to be arrested on the plane, if the police were going to come on the plane. That didn't happen. So basically, I waited until they got off. They were kind of refusing to get off while media was still on there. And then I followed them through the airport into customs, and they remained in immigration, and I was kind of pushed out. And then they were there for about 3 hours, where 2 of them were taken into custody, and the rest of the group, about the group of a dozen, were then taken out to the arrivals hall, and they were meted by a huge media scrum, and then it got quite physical. They had a group of about a dozen men in black suits of their supporters who came out to usher them out, and then they were taken into a white minivan before they left. But yeah, they were carrying their children out, and it got a bit physical at times there before they then left to try and start to rebuild their lives. But as I was talking to them on the plane about this possibility of facing arrest, they told me that they were willing to take the hit, and they were expecting this just so that their children could come to Australia and be safe after spending so long in Syria.
You've had a couple of big days. Were they quite open to talking to you on the flight?
Yeah, so I met them first at Doha Airport, and when I was trying to find these women, I actually heard them before I saw them, because they have such thick Australian accents, even though they have actually been in Syria, some of them for 12 years. They were initially a bit hostile when I approached them. I don't think they were expecting to see media at the airport, but they actually quickly warmed and became quite friendly, and I could just tell how excited they were to finally be back in Australia, and the fact that this is actually happening, because it's been a few false starts. They tried to leave the camp in February, but they were turned around on the road because they didn't coordinate properly with the Syrian government. The main thing that they were saying to me was really this overwhelming hope of finally getting their children back home to Australia. They said that this has been awful conditions living in this Al Roj refugee camp. The Australian government has described the conditions there as squalid, and they told me that they really feared for their kids' safety in those camps, and they said it was living like hell. So they were just really relieved to finally be touching down in Melbourne, and hopefully they said that they can start to rebuild their lives. We actually had Wi-Fi on the plane, and I could see them constantly looking for updates of what was happening in terms of their story and their situation. And then when they learned that some of them were going to be arrested, they were actually quite calm, and I talked to them about that, and they said that they were prepared for that, and they were prepared for what's to come, and they were just basically just so relieved and so happy to be finally getting back to Australia. But looking ahead now, there are still 21 Australians that remain in that refugee camp in Syria. They all want to come home. They're all Australian citizens with Australian passports. And I can tell you from the supporters I've spoken to that they will be travelling back to Damascus in the next week or 2 to try and bring those Australians home.